Keith Moore, Department of Anatomy and Cell Biology, University of Toronto, Canada.
For the past 3 years, I have worked with the Embryology Committee of King Abdulaziz University, Saudi Arabia, helping them to interpret the many statements in the Qur'an, referring to human reproduction and prenatal development. At first I was astonished by the accuracy of the statements that were recorded in the 7th century, before the science of embryology was established. Although I was aware of the glorious history of Muslim scientists in the 10th century, and some of their contributions to medicine, I knew nothing about the religious facts and beliefs contained in the Qur'an.
At a conference in Cairo, he presented a research paper and he stated that,
"It has been a great pleasure me to help clarify statements in the Qur'an about human development. It is clear to me, these statements must have come to Muhammad from God, because almost all of this knowledge was not discovered until many centuries later. This proves to me that Muhammad must have been a messenger of God."
Professor Moore also stated that,
"The staging of human embryos is complex, owing to the continuous process of change during development. It is proposed that a new system of classification could be developed using the terms mentioned in the Qur'an. The proposed system is simple, comprehensive, and conforms with present embryological knowledge. The intensive studies of the Qur'an and Hadith in the last 4 years have revealed a system of classifying human embryos that is amazing, since it was recorded in the 7th century.
William W. Hay, marine scientist, satellite photography and remote sensing techniques, University of Colorado, USA. Zindani met with him and asked him many questions about the marine surface, the divider between upper and lower sea, and about the ocean floor and marine geology. Professor Hay replied,
"I find it very interesting that this sort of information is in the ancient scriptures of the Holy Qur'an, and I have no way of knowing where they would have come from. But I think it is extremely interesting that they are there, and this work is going on to discover it, the meaning of some of the passages."
Professor Alfred Kroner, Department of Geosciences, University of Mainz, Germany. Sheikh Zindani met with him and presented several Quranic verses and hadith, which he studied and commented upon. Alfred Kroner said,
"Somebody who did not know something about nuclear physics 1,400 years ago could not, I think, be in a position to find out from his own mind, for instance, that the earth and the heavens had the same origin. If you combine all these statements that are being made in the Qur'an in terms that relate to the earth and the formation of the earth and science in general, you can basically say that statements made there in many ways are true. They can now be confirmed by scientific methods, and in a way, you can say that the Qur'an is a simple science textbook for the simple man, and that many of the statements made in there at that time could not be proven, but that modern scientific methods are now in a position to prove what Muhammad said 1,400 years ago."
E. Marshall Johnson, Director of the Daniel Bow Institute, Thomas Jefferson University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. Professor Johnson began to take an interest in the scientific science in the Quran at the 7th Saudi Medical Conference, when a special committee was formed to investigate scientific science in the Quran. At first, Professor Johnson refused to accept the existence of such verses in the Quran, but after a discussion with Sheikh Zindani, he took an interest and concentrated his research on the internal as well as external development of the fetus.
He said, in summary, the Quran describes not only the development of external form, but emphasizes also the internal stages, the stages inside the embryo, of its creation and development, emphasizing major events recognized by contemporary science. As a scientist, I can only deal with things which I can specifically see. I can understand embryology and developmental biology. I can understand the words that are translated to me from the Quran. As I gave the example before, if I were to transpose myself into that era, knowing what I do today and describing things, I could not describe the things that were described. I see no evidence to refute the concept that this individual Muhammad had to be developing this information from some place. So I see nothing here in conflict with the concept that divine intervention was involved in what he was able to write.
Dr. Tivian Prasad, Professor of Anatomy, Pediatrics and Child Health, University of Manitoba, Manitoba, Canada.
He told, Muhammad was a very ordinary man. He could not read or write, in fact he was illiterate. We are talking about 1,400 years ago. You have someone who was illiterate, making profound pronouncement and statements, and are amazingly accurate about scientific nature. I personally cannot see how this could be mere chance. I have no difficulty in my mind in concerning that this is a divine inspiration or revelation, which led him to these statements.
Jolie Simpson, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Baylor College of Medicine, Houston, Texas, USA.
He said, I think, that not only is there no conflict between genetics and religion, but in fact religion can guide science by adding revelation to some traditional scientific approaches. That there exists statements in the Qur'an shown by science to be valid, which supports knowledge in the Qur'an having been derived from God.
Gerald C. Gringer, Department of Cell Biology, School of Medicine, Georgetown University, Washington, D.C., USA.
Sheikh Indani asked him whether in the history of embryology was there any mention of the different stages of embryonic development, or whether there existed any embryological texts at the time of the Prophet. Sheikh Indani also asked his opinion regarding the terms the Quran uses to describe the different phases of fetal development. In a relatively few Quranic verses is contained a rather comprehensive description of human development, from the time of commingling of the gametes through organogenesis. No such distinct and complete record of human development, such as classification, terminology, and description, existed previously. In most, if not all instances, this description antedates by many centuries the recording of the various stages of human embryonic and fetal development, recorded in the traditional scientific literature.
Professor Saibeda, Professor of Marine Geology, Japan. Sheikh Zindani asked him, what is your opinion of what you have seen in the Quran and the Sunnah with regard to the secrets of the universe, which scientists only discovered now?
I think it seems to me very, very mysterious, almost unbelievable. I really think if what you have said is true, the book is really a very remarkable book. I agree.
Tejatat Tejasan, Department of Anatomy, University of Siang, Thailand. During the 8th Saudi Medical Conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, he stood up and said,
In the last 3 years, I became interested in the Quran. From my studies and what I have learned throughout this conference, I believe that everything that has been recorded in the Quran 1400 years ago must be the truth, that can be proved by the scientific means. Since the Prophet Muhammad could neither read nor write, Muhammad must be a messenger, who relayed this truth which was revealed to him as an enlightenment by the one who is eligible creator. This creator must be God, or Allah. I think this is the time to say, there is no God to worship except Allah, Muhammad Rasul Allah, Muhammad is messenger of Allah. The most precious thing I have gained from coming to this conference is, La ilaha illa Allah, and to have become Muslim.
Tom Armstrong, Professor of Astronomy, University of Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, USA.
Professor Armstrong was asked a number of questions. You have seen and discovered for yourself the true nature of modern astronomy by means of modern equipment, rockets, and satellites developed by man. You have also seen how the same facts were mentioned by the Quran 14 centuries ago. So what is your opinion? He said, that is a difficult question which I have been thinking about since our discussion here. I am impressed at how remarkably some of the ancient writings seem to correspond to modern and recent astronomy. I am not a sufficient scholar of human history to project myself completely and reliably into the circumstances that 1,400 years ago would have prevailed. Certainly, I would like to leave it at that what we have seen is remarkable. It may or may not admit of scientific explanation. There may well have to be something beyond what we understand, as ordinary human experience, to account for the writings that we have seen.
Dorja Rao, Professor of Marine Geology, King Abdulaziz University, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Sheikh Zindani presented to Professor Rao many verses dealing with his area of specialization and asked, "What do you think of existence of the scientific information in the Quran? How could Prophet have known about these facts 14 centuries ago?"
It is difficult to imagine that this type of knowledge was existing at that time, around 1400 years back. Maybe some of the things they have simple idea about, but to describe those things in great detail is very difficult. So this is definitely not simple human knowledge. A normal human being cannot explain this phenomenon in that much detail. So, I thought the information must have come from a supernatural source.
Ashidi Kuzan, Director of the Tokyo Observatory, Tokyo, Japan.
He said, "I say, I am very much impressed by finding true astronomical facts in Quran, and for us modern astronomers have been studying very small piece of the universe. We have concentrated our efforts for understanding a very small part. Because by using telescopes, we can see only very few parts of the sky without thinking about the whole universe. So by reading Quran and by answering to the questions, I think I can find my future way for investigation of the universe."
Maurice Bacquel, Chief of the Surgical Clinic, University of Paris, France. After a study which lasted 10 years, Dr. Bacquel addressed the French Academy of Medicine in 1976 concerning the existence in the Quran of certain statements concerning physiology and reproduction. His reason for doing that was that
our knowledge of these disciplines is such that it is impossible to explain how a text produced at the time of the Quran could have contained ideas that have only been discovered in modern times. The above observation makes the hypothesis advanced by those who see Muhammad as the author of the Quran untenable. How could a man, from being illiterate, become the most important author, in terms of literary merits, in the whole of Arabic literature? How could he then pronounce truths of a scientific nature, that no other human being could possibly have developed at that time, and all this without once making the slightest error in his pronouncement on the subject?
Markel H. Hurt, a famous astrophysicist, New York, United States.
He told that, "My choice of Muhammad to lead the list of the world's most influential persons may surprise some readers, and may be questioned by others, but he was the only man in history, who religious and secular level,